Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. President Trump recently suggested that his accomplishments were so great that maybe we didn't need a midterm election. Outright canceling elections is a very dictator move and something that many feared he would attempt to do to retain power now that he had seized it. Obviously, he and his party can't lose their grip on the federal and state governments if they never get voted out of office. When it was pointed out just how bad it sounded to have a president even suggest canceling elections, it was written off as a joke, which rung a bit hollow from a man who was not known for his humor. He's much more well known for just saying what he plans to do and then doing it. So if he was even hinting at considering canceling elections, it was at least something he had in mind and would at the very least like to do. One of the snags to that plan, though, is that while canceling the midterm election would obviously hurt Democrats the most, it would not only be affecting them. There were plenty of Republicans up for office who would not care to have their opportunity to be elected removed, while suspending the upcoming midterm election would ensure that the Republicans who would be losing their seats would be able to retain them. It would also eliminate the ability to gain any more seats. And as the Republican majority in Congress seems to only dwindle as several Republicans have announced their retirement, canceling the midterm election would not be entirely beneficial to the Republicans. So while I'm sure the idea of canceling elections and retaining his party's tenuous control on all of the U.S. government indefinitely seems appealing to the president, the reality is he's unlikely to actually act upon that. So the good news is we definitely will have a midterm election this November. The bad news is it's absolutely not going to be a free and fair election. The Republicans will pull out every possible stop to cheat and manipulate so that they do not lose those elections. The loss of total control that would result from the projected massive Democratic wins in the upcoming midterm elections would be a blow not only to Trump's unchecked power, but to his ego, and that is something he simply cannot allow. He's a man who thrives on total control, and giving that up seems unthinkable. And a massive Republican loss would be the end of that. He previously expressed regret that he had not mobilized the National Guard back in 2020 to seize voting machines in swing states, since, of course, in his mind, the only possible way he could have lost there was if there was some sort of Democrat fraud. But whatever restraints had held him back in his first term no longer exist now, so it's absolutely not outside the realm of possibility that he does exactly that this time, under the auspices of fraud prevention, and pushing the narrative that the only legitimate outcome is a Republican win. Donald Trump has long been an enemy of the voting machine after they failed to give him the presidency in 2020. And his repeated claims of fraud were repeatedly proven to be false. It seems fairly clear now that his repeated calls the voter machine-related fraud was less about genuinely believing that there was fraud and more about creating doubt in their legitimacy, so a certain section of the population would be distrustful of them any time a Republican lost. Can't trust the voting machines, they're just a tool of the Democrats to steal elections. If they can't win, he can at least sow doubt in the validity of their loss. The scary thing is it will likely go quite a lot deeper than just making people question the results of the voting machines. They're likely to attempt to weaken election security by making cuts to the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency, which provide necessary security support to election offices, which is what allows them to ensure those elections are secure, and weakening them only makes malfeasance even easier, which virtually guarantees voting irregularities in favor of a Republican victory. They're also likely to pass off responsibility for investigating and prosecuting election crimes to the Department of Justice, a department the president has near complete control over through Attorney General Pam Bondi. So we'd likely see not only a blind eye turned to Republican favoring voter fraud, but likely manufactured charges of voter fraud and manipulation by Democrats, making voting less secure, less safe, and completely delegitimizing any Democratic successes in the elections. And just like that, cheating becomes infinitely easier for Republicans, and those who are tasked to investigate it have no incentive to do so because it benefits them. It would be like underfunding the lock companies so they can only make weak locks, so that breaking in and stealing things from businesses was easier, and then controlling the police so they don't investigate those break-ins. You're essentially making crime not only easier but tolerated by those officials who are supposed to stop it. Weakening election security in that way, as well as giving the Department of Justice more power over prosecuting and investigating election crimes, are both points detailed in Project 2025, a plan President Trump campaigned on having no knowledge of, yet has spent the entirety of his first year in office enacting nearly point by point. It seems almost painfully obvious to see that the president is using Project 2025 as a guidebook to guide what he does. And there's a solid chance if it tells him to do these things, he will do them. A massive surge of Democratic wins would be a huge blow to the image that Donald Trump is attempting to cultivate as a great and powerful leader, and call into question his performance as the president. And the last thing a narcissist like him wants is somebody calling into question his ability to perform. Donald Trump is a loser who hates to lose, and I have no doubt in my mind that he will do everything in his power to cheat and steal and do whatever he can to make sure that he does not lose in 2026. Because if we had a fair and accurate election, the Republicans would be absolutely destroyed, and his grip on power would be loosened, and he would be weakened as the president, and he cannot stand that idea. Donald Trump likes and admires authoritarian leaders, so it stands to reason that he would likely take inspiration from their playbooks on how to maintain their iron grip on the seat of power. Strong men who gerrymander and change the way votes are cast to ensure that they always come out on top, no matter what the voters say. At this point, his sense of complete control is pretty much all Donald Trump has. Physically, his body seems to be deteriorating on a daily basis, with a new bruise on his hand seeming to be obvious in all the recent images of him. And cognitively, he doesn't need to be doing any better, oftentimes seeming far more cognitively impaired than his predecessor Joe Biden ever did. So with his body and mind seeming to rapidly be failing him, his image and his power is where he's putting all of his focus. As a weak man who pretends to be a strong one, the last thing he wants is obvious evidence that he is indeed both a weak leader and a weak man. And a massive electoral loss for Republicans in the midterms would be exactly that. It would not only put an end to his unrestricted control and power, essentially making him a so-called lame duck president, but it would serve as undeniable evidence that all of his claims about how popular and successful he and his Republican colleagues have been during the second Trump administration were complete fabrications, and potentially cause many of his supporters to wake up to just how badly manipulated they were by him. He would be forced to spend whatever's left of his second term as a severely weakened president, and finally have some measure of accountability applied to him again, and may signal that that level of complete Republican control over the federal and state governments will never come again. It would be the end of his total rule over America. And now that he's had a taste of what near absolute control tastes like, he has no desire to ever give it up. The only real solace here is that it has not yet happened. These are all plans, or at least intentions, that have yet to become implemented. While Donald Trump and the Republicans absolutely intend to steal the 2026 midterm elections, they have not yet succeeded, so there is at least in theory time to stop them. But to do that, these concerns and threats would have to be taken seriously, and for many, they are not. Many in the Democratic establishment have focused on finding good candidates to win in November, but not focused on making sure they're going into elections that are even winnable, because they'll be actively rigged in the Republicans' favor. One of the Democrats' greatest faults is they believe in fairness and honesty and figure if they're not going to be dishonest, their opponents won't be, but they don't factor into the fact that their opponents absolutely do not care and will be dishonest if it means they win. The Republican Party with even an ounce of integrity and honesty died, and Donald Trump killed it. Democrats are going in expecting a fair fight in the midterms, and that is not what they're going to get. Underestimating Republicans' desire to win at any cost and throwing integrity and honesty out the window at their first chance will only be to the detriment of the Democrats. To Donald Trump, the Republicans, winning is all that matters, and losing was never on the table. If voters are signaling that they think Republican leadership has failed, and they want many of those Republican elected officials to be replaced with Democrats, possibly even laying the groundwork for the end of the Republican presidency in the next presidential election, they simply cannot allow it and will not think twice, subverting the will of the people if it means retaining their power. They know all too well what's at stake when they lose. If Democrats retake control in Congress, Donald Trump can likely look forward to impeachment and conviction, possibly even the removal from office those on the left have been praying for since the day he was elected. As former Trump advisor Steve Bannon said at a recent conservative event, quote, "And I will tell you right now, as God is my witness, if we lose the midterms, if we lose 2028, some in this room are going to prison, myself included." Those on the right know what they will be losing when Democrats take back power following their numerous wins in the midterm elections. It will be a disaster for them, and they will do whatever they can to make sure it never happens. They are spelling out that they're going to cheat and rig the midterm elections for the Republicans. It is a clear statement of intent, and one Democrats cannot afford to take lightly or ignore. If steps aren't taken now to safeguard the midterm election against Republican interference, President Trump won't have to cancel the elections. We'll have elections, but Democrats will never win one ever again, because every future election will now be rigged for the Republicans. If Trump and Republicans are shown they can successfully rig one election, they will never stop, and this country will truly only have a democracy in name only. Because while we'll still have elections, we may as well only have Republicans on the ballot, because those are the only ones who will ever win. I hope that never happens, but now it is up to those who have the ability to stop it to do so, and to act before it's too late, because if they don't, they won't get another chance. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.